Welcome. Good to see all of you that have joined us today. Lorraine, Z, Fran, Sabrina. I'm most delighted to be here, not only just because of the work that I get to do, but I really enjoy seeing what transpires from it. So please feel free to engage in the chat box anytime you have questions. We have a really good intimate group here that allows you to ask more questions. And I think what's most valuable in these times is to actually take maybe some applications for it and start to apply it in maybe some situations that you have right now. And so, us here at New Leaf, we really do believe in engagement, and we have a lot of different ways that we like to partner and do our services. And so today, we'll be incorporating in the more seminar, what we call the e-seminar part of doing things, and learning how to positively reduce conflict. And as a reminder for today's, we have a half-day session. It's really about 75 minutes. So hopefully you've made some arrangements to take some time to be fully present and engaged. I know there's a lot of distractions out there. Probably your email is going to ping you, your phone's going to buzz you. And if you're like me, working from home, your daughter might run in. So if you see her going in the background, please wave hi and excuse me as I put myself on mute and ask her to go out. But she's still learning to understand the boundaries and of what it is about working from home. So, since 2006, New Leaf has served clients from all over the United States, as well as China, India. We got Western Europe, Australia. And one of the things that we've been really doing is about teaching principles rather than techniques. And principles for us really ensures where techniques are just temporal and what we say becomes easily forgotten. So if you tend to think about your behaviors and what you can do and what's going to happen, then a lot of times what we find is we get greater results from ourselves, our teams, and our organizations, because principles are more objectives. And if you think about it, it's not just about our expressions or the things that we do, which can be more subjective from our perspectives. But if you kind of take principles which tend to be more timeless, you'll find that these are practices that we can try to move our leadership skills through, and allows us to have more of a natural way of being able to lead other people. And it tends to be a less inhibited for other people to come alongside us. So if you think about maybe some principles that are out there, it could be like the rule of the harvest. We reap what we sow. Another principle would be like the golden rule. You want to treat others the way you would like to be treated. And some of the things that we think about are also like the principle of gravity. Things fall. It doesn't matter whether we're here, in Fresno, in Australia, London, gravity doesn't seem to be different from no matter where you are. So we'd like to try to teach you these type of principles, ways that we can learn these things and allow you to be able to reap, what you sow, so to speak. So if we look at maybe three things that we want you to be able to really take away from today are the ability to manage yourself, the ability to lead others. And if you're fortunate and you have the opportunity to take a business financial class, then we sometimes will delve into more of the financial intelligence. But today, we're really going to focus on managing yourself and being able to better lead others through influence in that way. So 3 promises that we really want to share with you is, 1, hopefully you won't be bored. 2, if you could be really participative, you'll really get an opportunity to practice. Again, we want you to be able to put these into some things that you might be dealing with today, finding new ways to engage with others around you. And our goal is again to be practical. We want you to really see what we do is not really just theoretical, but something that you can apply into some of the challenges you have. So here's some things that you're going to learn about our methodology of learning. Is 1, I'm going to present a principle. It's going to be a proven concept or some type of robust theory on how to reduce conflict. And the question is going to be about that theory or concept. We want you to do an exercise and practice it and understand it. And then thirdly, we say, so what? So now that you know this, what are we going to do about it? and be able to try to shift your leadership and engagement with other people into a more enhanced form. So let's go ahead and go through what we call the cycle. I know a lot of you have been probably taking some of the classes that have been done through some of my other colleagues, but anybody recall what this cycle is? We call this the PBR cycle. Anyone see this one before? Yeah, Becky, do you want to give it a shot in terms of what might be the first step in the PBR cycle?
I think the first one is principles. I could be wrong.
No, well, good, good. It is P, it's perception, but they all go towards principles. So the final answer is principle. So we'll play a little bit of Jeopardy here. We would say like, what is, principles is typically an outcome that we want to lead with, first being with this letter P. So we'd say perception. And so when you look at these different type of models that help us to understand, it's really how we see things that drive the behaviors that we tend to receive. So it's almost like a cause and effect, right? Like if we have a certain perception on something or someone or the different organizations that we have, then automatically based upon our past, it's going to drive our behavior, right? So think about our perceptions, how we see things, and then that's automatically to drive our behavior. Like one of the things for me is anytime I see like blue sky and it's nice and sunny outside, my behavior is to want to wear, short shirts and shorts, right? But then I was in Alaska earlier this year, and it was 50 degrees, not 75 degrees as I thought it would be, right? And that's where I needed to shift my perception and the behaviors that I have. And these sets of behaviors that we do tend to, again, drive those results. So I had a result of being misdressed because my perception was very subjective to the way I grew up. I was putting I live in Santa Clarita, my Santa Clarita experiences to Alaska. And from there, the results I got was I was a little bit off, and I was a little bit mistaken when we talked about like certain principles. And this is where Becky was talking about driving about these principles. So the principles of saying like for weather, for example, just because it's blue skies and nice clouds and nice and sunny outside doesn't necessarily always mean that I could wear shorts and a shirt. But if you think about some of the principles that we have and see where we kind of drive ourselves in what we do, then sometimes there's some universal truths in our principles that we can do to better engage with that, right? So for example, I'm going to pick on you, Lorraine. You're going to get extra credit today and you do really well. What are some principles, maybe some universal truths that you can say? It doesn't have to necessarily be with leadership, but like something that if this, then I know I can always do that and drive the result you're looking for. So
I know we went through this in the last seminar I attended.
okay.
I know that principles are true, are universal, true, and they exist. So
Absolutely.
Principles that are universal, true, and exist.
Mhm.
The sun will rise in the morning.
Yeah, there you
In the
go.
east, the sun will rise in the east in the morning.
Okay.
Is that okay? Is that what you're looking
absolutely.
for?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely. So since we know that to be an absolute truth, right? What are some perceptions and behaviors that you could always count on based upon that truth?
Based on the fact that the sun will rise again in the morning?
Either that or that it comes from the east.
It comes from the east. Wait, ask me the question again.
Yeah. So what
The last
behavior
question.
or perceptions can you like if we were to reverse this through, like what are some things that, since you know that principle, what are some things that you can actually base some actions on that?
So based on that, when I open my bedroom drapes in the morning, I can look out my window and see the sunrise.
Good.
Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I don't know
Good.
if you wanted me to get deeper than that, but yeah.
No, that's fairly deep. Because that's something that I do. Like I'm a morning riser that likes the sun to wake me up, not somebody that likes darkness, or like when I go to hotels, I don't put the curtains, like the night shades on, because I want to wake up by the sun, not necessarily by a loud alarm. So those are basic principles, like the perception that I know the sun's going to rise in the east, or like, hey, if I want to enjoy a nice sunset, then I'm going to look west. Like those are behaviors that we could do based on the perception of where we see the sunrise and the sunset. Cool. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, and by the way, those are amazing life lessons that we can kind of go and live, and it could impact you or it may not impact you. So if we're going to take that and let's drive that towards maybe some ways to reduce conflict. Okay. If you're going to say, what are some principles that we can absolutely believe in that would be true, and then we could actually bank on when it comes to engaging with other people in reducing conflict? Becky, do you have anything there?
Sorry, can you ask the question again?
Yeah, what about reducing conflict? What are some principles? What are some things that you could believe that'll work anywhere and everywhere for the most part when it comes to reducing conflict with others?
Maybe speaking calmly.
Yeah, good. So when you're in a situation where you feel like there's some escalation and tension, managing your voice and speaking calmly is a way that you can reduce conflict or escalation in those areas. Is that right? Good. Susie?
Reducing conflict will improve your relationships.
Good. That's a great principle, right? So using the principle of speaking calmly and then reducing your, sorry, say that one again. All right. I just kind of merged Becky's with yours.
It improves relationships. Reducing conflict improves relationships.
That's right. You'll have better relationships. You'll have better engagement with the other people around you by reducing conflict. Good. Fran, did you have something?
Well, listening. The last one we took, he was really teaching us how to listen without anticipating, what you were going to say. So I thought that was real valuable. So just listen, really listen to what you're saying first before you think of a reply.
Good. I appreciate that, right? Like not trying to wait till the other person stops talking for you to talk, but actually taking the time to actively listen and hear what they're saying.
Right.
Good. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Anybody else? And if anyone else has any thoughts that they want to share in the chat box, I see a lot of people are also muted and camera off. And for just a heads up, if you have your camera off and your mic muted, I don't know what's going on. So I tend not to pick you, but you're more than welcome to keep it that way and raise your hand like Sabrina did. So Sabrina, did you want to share some thoughts?
Yeah, and I keep camera off because I like to cut my hair, so sorry. But I had thought, you guys know I'm not lying, anyone who knows me. I was thinking more like acknowledging what the other person is saying, or, actively just acknowledging, or repeating what they're saying to make sure that you're understanding.
Yeah. Good. So like demonstrating that you listened to them and heard what they have to say. And so not just actively listening, but taking the time to repeat back what they're sharing, and helps them to feel more comforted, maybe perhaps that you're on the same page, building common ground. Is that right? Yeah. Good. Great examples. So hopefully we've had a chance to really think about these principles, right? And a lot of them, we could write them down. We could do them. And I think, if you ever read like self-help books or leadership books, there's a ton of these examples out there for us to follow. But I think one of the things that makes it really difficult for us to actually engage them and do them sometimes is realizing where our disposition is, right? Like sometimes we can underestimate how difficult it is to do some of these things, or sometimes we may overestimate how nice the other person is on the other side. You know, one principle that I often talk about is like the golden rule. And I think a lot of times we might misinterpret what the golden rule is trying to say. You know, the idea is the intention that, you know, I'm going to treat other people the way I want to be treated. But the fact is, like, I want to be treated with respect, but how I want to be treated with respect might look differently from how other people want to be treated with respect, right? So if I treat Fran the way I want to be treated, Fran might feel like that is disrespectful because the way I like to be treated might be different from the way Fran wants to be treated. But if I were to be more mindful and say, hey, I'm going to treat Fran the way she wants to be treated. And in times of conflict and in times of maybe tense conversations where Fran is being super patient with my inability to pay attention or listen, and it just persistently practice incompetency, then I can be on the short end because I'm not doing a good job of managing my behavior in a way that's going to reduce the conflict that we have. And so one of the things that we want to do is really get the better results by aligning our behaviors and perceptions with some other principles that might help us to understand where we're coming from and dig a little bit deeper so we can be more successful in executing these. Because it sounds like from this group, we all know a lot of these leadership behaviors: listening, you know, treating other people the way they want to be treated, engaging, giving feedback, talking more softly, and not allowing these things to escalate. But the reality is we have difficulty in doing that. And I think by being more aware of where these things come from, I think it can be super helpful. So for example, you know, when we think about these perceptions and behaviors, you know, the only thing we can really control is our own perceptions and behaviors, right? Like I can't control how other people tend to react to things. I can't control the results of my behaviors and the outcomes. But what I can do is realize that my perceptions might be very limited to the scope of my 27 years of living. And that's a joke. I could also manage my behaviors based upon how I interpret things from other people. But if you think about these perceptions that we gain, you know, what are some of the areas of how we achieved our perceptions? What are some of the ways that we've really been influenced of how we see things? Cindy, do you have any answers there? How do you think your perceptions have been really tuned? Oh, you're on mute, sorry. Great.
I believe that we're socialized first within our family unit from a young age. And so that has a tendency to your perceptions of things and your beliefs are guided from that initially. And then as you mature, you develop some of your own concepts and beliefs and your behaviors. And the more time you spend around other people and in both positive and negative situations, you learn things about how things could be handled better.
Good. Very good, Cindy. So
Thank you.
yeah, absolutely true. Like our perceptions are definitely given to us by, I call nurture, like our parents that nurtured us, or maybe our teachers or our friends that kind of gave us these different perceptions that we have. Now, Cindy, have you ever had the wrong perception growing up before you even made your own choices?
Oh, of course, yes.
that kind of puts you on the spot there, Cindy. So thanks for playing with me. What would be an example of where you've seen it? And you don't have to criminalize yourself, but where have you seen maybe some people that they've had certain perceptions that were given to them from their upbringing that they didn't realize that was maybe incorrect?
Well, I think this really relates well to all of what we're learning, more that we're learning about equity and how we treat and understand people of other cultures other than our own.
Mm-hmm.
And so the whole campus is, we've been going through this for a few years on really understanding what equity is compared to equality. And some of the things as people are nurtured or mistreated because of their race or ethnicity. As a white person, we may not understand it because that's not what we perceive, what we live through. So it takes more understanding of others and openness to really understand behaviors and attitudes, and then be aware of how you're responding, not just from your own perception, but including what you understand about other people.
That's good. And that's a very drastic way to look at things now, right? It's been very different, and a lot of events have occurred in the past year and a half to accelerate that change. What's one, if we go to behavior, and now that your perception has changed a little bit, what is one behavior maybe that you've changed to maybe not necessarily positively reduce conflict, but maybe it reduced some areas that people might have felt uncomfortable with you, or like, what are some behaviors that you've done to be a little bit more inclusive, possibly?
A lot of just a lot of things. I'm just much, even though my family is multicultural, my husband, my children, and I, and so it helps me to understand some of their behaviors and attitudes, say particularly my husband. So that does help me to understand why he responds negatively to some things.
I think a lot of us might have some embarrassing stories, maybe, where we've maybe applied our own perceptions, right, behaviors, and not realize that it might have had a different result, because different people have different perceptions and they would do different behaviors when it comes to it. And so I really appreciate you sharing that, Cindy. That's pretty vulnerable there. I think if we were all honest with ourselves, I think we all have a nickname somewhere, maybe, that might not be always flattering or positive, but it's a way that we can maybe manage and realize like the conflict that resulted from it. And hopefully it's a redeeming ability to that we would not be that person in the past that earned that nickname, but we can start working on redeeming that name towards someone that has learned from it. And so today, we're going to really work on understanding how to better navigate those conflicts and understand that we have these different perceptions in reality. And for a lot of the things that we want to do, and a lot of you take the Thomas Kilmann inventory, we want ourselves to be able to understand where that true north really is on how we're going to point towards creating better relationships. I mean, Cindy, it sounds like it's family. So for better or worse, you can't get rid of them. They can't get rid of you. But we would hate in the workplace here to lose influence with people and them peg you as someone that you don't want to be. And I really hope that these techniques today will really help us to drive some principles that we can really learn from and glean. And I think one of the things that we could really say as one of those principles is to not really look out for our own interests. And today we're really going to talk about understanding that we can reduce conflict and even eliminate it if we look at the interest for others and realize that when we look at not necessarily just a win-win situation, but also like what we say, a win-win and nobody loses situation, I think that's going to really help them to say that, hey, I'm really here for our own interests together. I'm not here to gain off of you, and I don't want you to necessarily gain off of me solely, but I want us to come to an agreement in a relationship that's going to be a principle that allows them to realize that you're not here to offend, you're not here to profit off of them, but you're really there to manage a relationship that's going to be as conflict-free as we can. And also understand that, so much conflict can be just reduced even if we are managing these things. And there's someone called Dr. Stephen Covey. I don't know if anybody have met him or heard of him or read his books, actually learned a lot of my management skills 25 years ago from Covey and the Covey systems and Covey leadership. But this is one of the books that I have to say is one of my favorites. And about it is learning how to think what we call in habit number 4, a win-win type of scenario. And so if you got your TKI results, I don't know if you have it with you, we'll start kind of going over that a little bit. But again, it's understanding like, where do we start as a baseline? Some of you may realize that you have a lot more patience and understanding to be able to realize that some people have different perceptions and behaviors than you, and you're able to tolerate that. Some of you might have realized that you don't have a lot of tolerance and you tend to push your ideas and your preferences onto other people. And that's where the scale really comes from, this TKI, which stands for the Thomas Kilmann instrument. And it's named after the author that based upon these principles where how do we tend to respond or even try to reduce conflict when we look at the interests of others and our own. So if we look at necessarily our workbook to begin with as well, in the workbook, you'll see the objectives for today. And we'll kind of talk about that a little bit, understanding where we're headed, where our program objectives are. And if you review these and think about how you can relate these to your own world and how you, your team, or the people at Fresno City College can really be engaged with your customers, your peers, your stakeholders, it can really de-escalate, especially at a time when conflict seems to be a little bit more on a high-strung tension, right? I think everyone's trying to do things in different ways. Everyone may be frustrated that, I can't do things that I used to do. It used to be a lot easier living life, so to speak. But at the same time, adjusting maybe some of those principles and how you tend to perceive work can modify your behaviors and what you're going to do. So let's go ahead and take a look at the Thomas Kilmann instrument and what that means for us today. So anybody want to give a gander on conflict? Is conflict always a bad thing to have at the workplace? Anybody want to share? Should we eliminate all conflict? Is it so bad that we have conflict? Fran?
Well, sometimes you really have to discuss things. Someone might come up with a good idea, but they're not, you realize, if we do it this way, it's going to affect that. Do they see the whole picture? I think you have to go bounce back and forth the ideas, especially when you're going to change procedures. I don't think it's a good idea just to come out blanketly and say, we're going to do it this way now. Not a good idea. When so many departments have to process that paperwork, you might say, you're not seeing what accounting might have to do, or admissions of records, or financial aid, and you're very likely going to leave something out. So yeah, you really got to talk about it.
So why don't people do that to begin with? Why don't people? I mean, we know that happens all the time, and that seems like
for our organization, we're so big. You got to get us in one room. I mean, we have different buildings with different people. It's like a city. We live in a city. It's Fresno City College, and it's like, okay, sometimes we don't know what A building's doing, and we're B building. I find that frustrating at times. I'm just saying.
Yeah. So when people get frustrated, there's this friction that tends to occur. What we say is, that's another word for conflict, right? And one way we look at it is, I would say conflict refers to some sort of friction or discord arising between individuals when the perceptions, behaviors, or needs of both parties are not in alignment. So, Fran, you gave a very good story, right? One department wanted one thing, another department maybe was resistance to that change because they wanted maybe a stability, and this other department was trying to create instability without even knowing it, and there that conflict happened. Would you say that's probably a simplification of what happened there?
Yeah, that's pretty much, yep.
Okay. Well, it happens all over the place, right? And we all might have conflict. And I think if we take the time to really peeled back on why conflict occurs, I think there's just a blindness, right? Go back to perception. Like we didn't see something that's happening. And because I didn't see how the other person was gonna be adverse to some of these things happen, then we find that that conflict occurs. But again, the question is conflict in the workplace always a bad thing? And should we try to avoid it at all costs? Who's got a response to that?
I took that, this is Delphina speaking.
Hi, Delphina.
Hi, I took that, what is it, the assessment,
Yeah.
and I realized that I do a lot of avoiding.
Oh,
Yeah, it's like, and I didn't think I avoided that much. I mean, I thought like I thought compromising and collaborating, but no, and accommodating, but I do a lot of avoiding because I'm like, I don't know if it's always a bad thing, but I do avoid conflict a lot just because I'm like, I don't have room for it in my life, I guess. So
mhm.
I just feel like it's not worth it for me to have, to have a upset at the work environment. Just I have to live my life here. So pretty much 8 hours a day. So I just feel like, I guess I don't really stand up for things I believe in all the time. But then again, some of it, I feel like it's not as important. So it's not that big of a deal.
Sure. And I guess nobody wants to invite more stress or tension in our lives than we have to. But if we were to look at conflict, what do you think, Delphina, if somebody were to engage with you and he felt conflict happening and you didn't engage with it, meaning that you kind of brushed it off and you really didn't share your perceptions, right? What do you think the other person is missing out on that would really benefit them?
Okay, well then for sure they're missing out on just seeing another way or another viewpoint, or a way of doing things.
Mhm.
So
Good.
like maybe an easier way of doing things. Because
Yeah.
some people, like especially when it comes to work, it's always been done this way is one of the things I hear a lot. And so, but there's other things that can make it like so much easier.
Good,
But
good.
you know,
Do you think, Delphina, you're such a unique person that you're the only one that probably feels that way?
no,
Okay, good. And you wouldn't be the only one that benefits from it, right?
definitely not.
Okay. Anyone else have that type of experience where you feel something, you see something, and definitely you want to behave differently, and you know the conflict's going to be there, but where you could have zigged, you zagged maybe to avoid that?
Well, I think all people have, and I don't think conflict is necessarily bad.
Okay.
Because it varies upon the personality, the importance of the issue.
Mhm.
So sometimes where you may see it as conflict for someone else, they're just expressing their views, but they happen to be different. But it depends on if it's something that you find is worth having the discussion about versus something that you find is minor or not of that value, where you're just like, whatever.
Mhm.
So conflict's not necessarily bad, and I think everybody does pick and choose which battles they find worth getting into discussions, or however far it may go, depending on the personality of the other person.
Good, good. Thanks so much, Debbie, for sharing that, because I think that's absolutely true. And so if we were to look at conflict and find a way to have conflicting ideas and differences of opinions, then we could definitely share better ways to do things. I think that's what Delphina was coming up with a little bit. It could enhance our products and services. So at Fresno City College, maybe there's a way that Fresno City College tends to do things, but if we're not open to other viewpoints or ideas, then maybe we're missing out on the ability to serve our constituents better, whether they're students, other faculty members, other employees, or other people, right? And so if we could be so closed off into being able to engage in those conflict of ideas, not necessarily physical contact where, and I don't necessarily mean like actually like, physically contacting people, like, but that engagement where there's words I might have to exchange, or as Becky was sharing, like the raised voices of people that are starting to get a little bit more tense. If the consequences of having conflict could be mitigated, then it sounds like we may be willing to engage in those differencing of opinions or conflict of ideas, but we just have to pick and choose our battles of the emotional, maybe toll that it takes on us, as well as maybe the physical toll of just tiring us, draining us when we have a long day. Does that sound fair, Debbie?
Yeah, no, that's exactly.
Yeah. So what are some experiences, no names, but what are some experiences of conflict that some people have had experienced at the workplace? What's an experience? Fran's like laughing.
I think we all had experiences. There was a process of doing paperwork for travel, and how can I say this? I tend to do it head on. Like, there was an accounting issue, and I'm not in accounting, and the current person was saying accounting speak to me. So I went to their office and I said, and excuse my language, but I said, look, I don't understand your accounting language, and you're going to have to bring it down to my level. And so I kind of was in the middle of the office, so everybody heard me, but we duked it out, you might say, and we got to an understanding, because I could not serve her well unless I understood what person was saying to me. And it was interesting because sometimes a lot of people don't want to go there, but it's like, it's okay. Let's figure it out, because I don't want to mess this up again or cause you stress, because I'm going to be doing this again, and it's going to happen again. So sometimes when you do something so much, you kind of automatically think, oh, that person knows what it is, but that's not always the case. And sometimes somebody will be like, instead of going to the source, they'll go to somebody else they feel safer with.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to work with this person, and they have to understand, no, she's not stupid, she just doesn't understand. So that's kind of what I wanted to convey. And we developed a good relationship because I was able to say, we need to talk. You know, this isn't computing. And sometimes that's scary. But it was less stressful for me to get it right than to approach the person about it. You know, I didn't want to keep doing it that same route. So sometimes that's scary. And, you know, where you work in situations where there's not always privacy.
Yeah.
And you're just stuck there saying, okay, everybody put the earplugs on, because here we go. You're nice and respectful, but, you know, it's hard sometimes working in a big organization.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, there's a perception there, perspective there that you were able to share. I think that helped, Fran. And I wanted to acknowledge a principle of not putting yourself above the other person. So you saying, can you talk down to my level, not necessarily trying to put yourself above the other person level, right? I think that was something that was.
Well, it was like I was not trained with that accounting speak. So she was speaking a different language to me. And it wasn't computing.
Sure.
And it was like, okay, nah, debit credit means something else to me than what you're saying to me. I had a different definition of debit credit. Yeah.
Good. But I think that's a lot of that awareness, right? Like the common responses to conflict. Sometimes people just want to duke it out. Some people want to just, you know, not realize this might not be the time or place. But also, again, in that situation, I think the posture wasn't like calling the other person stupid, but saying, hey, I might be a little dumb when it comes to your language. Could you help me out here? Like you ask for assistance rather than like challenge the other person to be better at it, right? Like you weren't disparaging the other person. And I think that's helpful. You know, that's a little shrewd way about kind of maybe patting the other person on the back a little bit. Anyone else have an an experience of how people tend to respond to conflict when that happens?
Oh, I don't know if this is necessarily response, but it's one of the reasons why appropriate conflict is good, is that otherwise we end up with groupthink and no new ideas nor inventions ever come about because everybody's so worried about getting along with and going with whatever the main idea, concept, procedure, whatever it may be. Where sometimes stepping out and having those new ideas, others will see it as conflict because it's different, but it is growth.
Yeah. Good, good. Some people don't want to grow, all right? And so that might be one of the reasons why, like, your perception is pushing on their behavior that they don't want to do, you know? And so there's those tension points, right? Like just being able to realize that you need something different to get to a different result, you know, like you're feeling like you're going to go through that definition of insanity where they want you to do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result instead. So I think one of the things as we look at these different areas of conflict that we can be aware of is that how do we tend to respond? And again, if we're aware of how we respond can be different from how other people respond, then I think we could be a little bit more open in our perspectives for those that might be a little bit more challenging, for those that are being a little bit more passive. I think there are two different scales here. Like Fran was a little bit more addressing these things, whereas Delphina was saying that she's a little bit more passive. But realize, right, like you can go too far in one way and you could definitely go too far in the other. But if you could be aware of where you are, then you could be a little bit more self-aware how other people may perceive you and the drawbacks of withdrawing so much, as well as the drawbacks of engaging too aggressively in a situation that we have. And that's where the Thomas Kilman instrument helps us to kind of see those different type of modes that we have. For those that don't have the results, maybe you could just kind of follow along with me and see if you could identify some of these things that you might be. But the results will tell you like how much you tend to do one or the other or where you kind of go. So for example, if you look at the different type of scores, I talked about, you know, how assertive you are versus how cooperative you are. And earlier on one side of things, like Delphina was talking about how she tends to be very avoiding, means that she won't tend to push her perspectives. And when people want to engage in maybe some type of conflict, she will disconnect as well from that. So that's one area. To the extreme of someone that's very cooperative and not assertive, then they're going to always do what the other people want them to do. So they're engaging, they're just doing everything that the other person wants to do them. So it's kind of more of an order taker. You also see people that are very assertive on their side, and they tend to also not be they cooperate. They don't work with other people. So it's my way or the highway would be competing. And then collaborative is like, hey, let's push for a solution together and let's work together for that area. And I think what's key is I'd like to say is that I do think that you're nurtured in a lot of ways, that you've grown your perceptions and your behaviors, but sometimes, at least for me, I think sometimes it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. And so it's harder for me to try things from different perspectives if I just have a pattern of behavior that's been really ingrained in me. And so what I tend to do is realize how ingrained is my behavior, be aware of that, and create triggers in my own leadership so that when I tend to do things, then I'm going to take a step back and learn to do more of the withdrawing. And even though it might feel like I'm avoiding, the reality is I'm not avoiding because I'm naturally already scaled so high. So what that means is if you look at your scale, if you land in one spot or the other, and you realize the other person is maybe less cooperative, less assertive, or somewhere around that, you could become more of a responsive person by adjusting the way your leadership practices are towards where the other person is, and then learning how to engage in a more healthy way and not take things so personally. So for example, if someone's very competitive and you're very accommodating, realize the other person is very assertive and you don't have to worry about that person being really argumentative in a negative way, but they're just trying to reconcile thoughts and facts because their perceptions tend to be very hard-grained. And if you realize that you're more accommodating for that, then being able to maybe meet somewhere in the middle, they talk about compromise is worth it, only if you feel safe, right? I'm not forcing you, I don't want you to do anything that you don't feel safe, but I think there's an opportunity for you to engage and to share in conversation behavior that might be a little bit more yielding a result. So if you look at your scores, you'll see that you're measured amongst these 5 different areas. One is among competing. It's how assertive you are. As I said, collaborating is both assertive and cooperative. Compromising is intermediate in both assertiveness and cooperativeness. Avoiding is unassertive and uncooperative, and accommodating is unassertive and cooperative. And it's the opposite of competing. So I have a sample score here that you can look at. And what this tells you is, how do you relate to most other people? So in this sample score, it first tells you like how many of the answers did you actually respond to that were in that type of a field. And then what you do is you look back and say, okay, if the median, if most people tend to be around here, do you tend to be higher than others in that area? Do you tend to be within that area of how other people tend to do? Are you lower or where you are the least? And when you look at this and you look at the TKI model, what are some things about this person's tendency, for example, you could expect in times of conflict? So looking at this person here, what do you think this person is going to tend to do when conflict starts to arise?
Collaborate.
Yeah, they're going to want to collaborate. And what is that? What would you say that looks like?
And trying to work with the whole group to come up with a solution that everybody likes and also meets the main person who's leading it, their goals as well.
Good, good. Absolutely. So if you see that, they're going to try to find more answers for more people to kind of be all together. And then if that doesn't work, then they might kind of push for their thoughts and ideas. And if that doesn't work, then they may compromise and give up and like, all right, forget it. Like, we'll do whatever you want to do. And then eventually avoid and accommodate is probably what that order would be in times of stress. So if you look at your score, if you have yours, what are some things that it's telling you that you might know, but now it's kind of affirming it? Like, hey, there's an instrument here that's saying, like, I always knew this about myself, but I'm realizing this might be more true than I thought it would be. Anyone?
My score was, I guess, 100% in collaborating.
Wow.
It was 12 questions. I don't know if it's questions or not. It just says 12.
Uh-huh.
And then I got accommodating with 62%, avoiding with 34%, compromising with 27%, and completing with 10%.
Oh, wow. Did you feel like that's accurate for you?
Yes. I always want everybody's input. It doesn't even matter if I'm like making dinner. I want my husband, my kids' input. If I'm making if I'm planning a trip, I want everybody's input to make sure that, you know, it's just not my trip and they're just following along. So I value everybody's input, and so I'm very collaborating.
Okay. Okay. Do you feel like there might be some times that could also be counterproductive?
Yes, because like I feel like sometimes I'm giving up a lot of what I want to do for them. Like I'm making sacrifices to make other people happy, but then it's rewarding to me because like it's the people I love.
Mm. Do you think that maybe you don't have an opportunity for them to love you back if you don't share some of the preferences that you might have?
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, it's that two-way street, you know. And by no means am I trying to say like you're selfish or greedy by sharing your thoughts. But again, if you have a tendency, right, that you're always so far on one side, then being able to realize that how you engage and avoid conflict doesn't allow for other people to think of some ideas that maybe for you, Z, you have some great ideas that actually might be better for them that they realize than for themselves. And actually for you to also come back from vacation and not need a vacation for a mere vacation, but also like you actually got some rest and relaxation as well. It could possibly be a benefit for everybody else to gain, right? If you're constantly also taking care of other people, right?
Yes, I think I told my kids once, for once, I want to stop thinking, stop planning. Like, can you guys start learning how to think on your own? Like, because I'm doing all the thinking, all the planning. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's a lot of work, I'm doing for everybody, and then like, I feel like sometimes I don't do anything for myself.
Good, good. Anyone else have something that they're realizing about themselves as you look at the different scores?
This is Arian.
Arian.
Hi. So I was a little unsure of exactly how to interpret my score because I was a little unsure of how to take the test because I am the I deliver a lot of like LGBTQ and trans ally presentations here at the college. And when it comes to justice, I often feel like there's not really like a compromise, like you either support justice or, you don't support it. And that the only right way is to really, support people, diverse people and justice for diverse people. And so I was looking at from that kind of standpoint when I was taking the test, like, yes, I always try to, I'm always like firm in my goals, because I am like very dedicated to like making our campus safer for all of our students. And so I wasn't, and then I realized like partway through the assessment, like maybe I should be thinking about this in more of a personal way and like, and how like I would negotiate things like with my husband when we both like, when I want to put a bookcase there and he doesn't want to put a bookcase there, like maybe that's the kind of setting I should have been thinking of where like there's no right way, and so I kind of got, I was a little like unsure of exactly like how to take the test, which perspective, which scenario I should put myself in for this test. So I don't know if that like skewed my results at all, but it looked kind of exactly like what's on the screen, except like my last two numbers are 4 and 4.
Okay.
So I don't know if that exactly how accurate that was though, of like, of what it was trying to actually measure, or if I was maybe thinking about it from the wrong perspective.
It's okay. I think for the most part, what I hear you saying is like, just maybe the idea and just having a culture of inclusion can skew your numbers so much that you're so inclusive at some times. And then on the other time, sometimes their inclusive thoughts can actually be counter to your inclusive culture where they're being very exclusive. I don't know if that makes sense, but sometimes you let everybody and anybody have their thoughts. Sometimes it's not really engaging in what you're trying to do, right? What would you say your top 2 percentages were like for collaborating?
So it was collaborating and I believe it was compromising because it was 96744.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So very similar to like 87 and all that. Okay, cool. So I think that the key is to realize, as you look at these numbers for yourself, does that reflect to what you're trying to do? Like maybe you are collaborative, you're trying to work with everybody and you're willing to make compromises. But at some point, thirdly, if you're saying like it's collaborative, compromising, and then competing for you, then at some point, like you feel like, oh, I don't want to be so dishonest, or I don't want to be unloyal to the actual values that you have. Like your mission tends to be shaped by the values of inclusion, possibly of what you're trying to do. And so with that and understanding those type of tendencies for you, where again, might you be like too collaborative up front, where you might have to create some boundaries and create some maybe ground rules that everybody has to play in if they want to play in. Like you can't play in the inclusive play. Okay, The ground rules for, let's say, an inclusive playground would be that you have to be inclusive, you can't be exclusive, if that makes sense, right? And at least having some of those up front can help you to be more collaborative, because then you're not so skewed outside the place that it's driving you maybe crazy. It's a simple word.
I'm curious, like, if I was to take the test from like just thinking about like, interpersonal conflict, like, me and my coworker like arguing over like, what music to play in the office or something, like I wonder if like my scores would have been different, because I feel like I tend to be more let other people just do what they want, and I don't want to like cause a conflict over something that's like meaningless like music. But then I know that when I'm, in a LGBTQ workshop and and someone's like, well, I don't think you're a real man, then I will like, argue exactly why I am a real man.
Yeah.
Why I'm both real and a man. And, and so I feel like my scores might be very different depending on like, what kind of scenario I have in mind. So I'd be kind of curious to go take that test again with 2 different scenarios in mind and see if like, am I, if I have like a different mindset for each of these, like for personal versus like social justice.
I would argue, Arian, that your personal, I'm sure, so let me put this, your social justice and the things that you care about is probably manifested in your work with the LGBTQ community, would you say? Right?
Yeah.
So I think using that as an example probably heightened everything. I don't think it flipped anything, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Right. So like maybe you don't care about the music, but you do care about like what flavor, I don't know, Coca-Cola that we should serve, like when values start getting crossed. And what I say is that's why in times of tension, right, you'll start going down this order. And I think that'll be the same order for the things you care about. Maybe it'll take longer for the things that you're arguing that has to do with, what color cake are we gonna get? But when it gets to like identity and inclusivity, well, you're gonna move faster down this, but it'll tend to be still in that order, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Does that help you, Arian?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, cool. So I'm gonna do this. We've had a chance to like kind of look at our scores maybe and start processing this alone. But I want to give you both like 4 minutes each really quick, because we're running short on time a little bit, to just share with somebody like what you learned about yourself. So it's really fast, okay? So I learned this about myself and explain a little bit and let the other person explain. And then I'm going to give you 4 minutes each, which I think is way too much time, but I know we want to engage with each other. And so after you've done that, I'll zap you back in, and then we'll kind of close up our day. And then we'll regroup for later in the week. Okay, so I'll open up the rooms. You'll have 8 minutes, and then just share what's one thing that you're learning about yourself as you look at your Thomas Kilman inventory. Okay. Well, hopefully you had a good time chatting with your partner there and sharing some insights that you had for yourself. On Friday, when we get back together, we're going to have an opportunity to kind of dig in this a little bit more, understand what it really means. And so please take a moment to really go through the report for yourself. See if you can see these tendencies for yourself in the next couple of days until we meet back together again. And then when we do gather back together, we want you to see this and be aware of it and make those adjustments in your conflict so that it's a positive outcome, not always a win-lose situation. I think that's so much of where I think a lot of people's experiences are, that if there's conflict, there has to be a winner, there has to be a loser, and it's always a negative thing in what we have. So with that, I think we're out of time. If you have any questions, if you want to stay on for the next 5-10 minutes, I'm more than willing to engage with more conversations. But otherwise, have a great week. Engage in some constructive conflict. Don't beat people up. But maybe if you're a little bit too accommodating, give yourself an opportunity to maybe share your thoughts and ideas and allow other people to maybe revel at some of the perspectives that you have differently And that might change their behaviors as well. So thank you so much. And I'll see you Friday. Again, stick around if you have some more questions. More than happy to go through your results with you if you'd like. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye, Debbie.
Bye.
Bye, Cindy.
Bye. Thank you.
Uh-huh.